Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to another Lakers postgame reaction show. Just got back from my couch. I did not make the game tonight again. I'm still not feeling well and wanted to rest up before this 9-day 4-game road trip. And I missed arguably the game of the season for the Lakers, but I did get a better vantage point watching it on TV. There are some pros to watching a game from home rather than being there in the arena. But unfortunately, I was not there. I'm still not feeling well, if you guys can't tell from my voice. But Lakers won 113-109 in overtime, in an overtime thriller over the New York Knicks, rallying from a 13-point second half deficit, an 8-point deficit with 6 minutes remaining. Over the final 6 minutes, LeBron and Gabe Vincent combined for 5 3-pointers to force overtime. Then once in overtime, Luka Doncic hits the first 2 shots, both over Karl Anthony Towns, to give the Lakers some cushion. From that point on, New York would briefly tie the game at 107, but LA was in control for most of the overtime, pulling off their 8th straight win to improve to 40-21. They are playing incredible basketball right now, and regardless of what has been thrown at them, and I will be touching on some of the adversity that they faced in this game, it did not matter. And they have continually found ways to problem solve. They've continually found ways to persevere throughout whatever obstacles in their way. And we've seen a level of resilience from this group over the past 7+ weeks now that I don't think they had earlier in the season, and I don't think they had in previous seasons. And that's really the metamorphosis that this group has gone through over the past nearly 2 months or so at this point. But before we get into tonight's show and the takeaways and the Q&A, you guys know the drill. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. And for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. Shout out to the late night gang. Shout out to everybody in the chat right now. Going a little bit earlier, thankfully. That's another benefit from not being at the arena, is I'm able to write my newser and then do some transcribing and then get into my live, and then I'll be doing some more writing after this. So Lakers win 113-109, 8th straight win. They are 40-21. They remain number 2 in the Western Conference. Had they lost this game, they would have dropped to number 3 in the West, because Denver is 40-22. So LA would have been 39-22. So this was a big win. Like, considering the opponent, considering they're about to go on what I think is arguably going to be their hardest 4-game stretch remaining in the regular season, with at Boston. Then they get a slight break with at Brooklyn. And that, though I'm sure D'Angelo Russell would love to spoil their success, then they get the at Milwaukee, at Denver back-to-back, which is just like 3 of those 4 games. It's as brutal of a stretch as you could basically have with all those coming on the road. But with the way the Lakers are playing, like, I think they are well equipped to handle that stretch. So overarching thoughts from me on this game were the Lakers withstood a lot of adversity. And as JJ talked about pregame, it was interesting. He said that even with the winning, there have been some things that he's been concerned by, and that his brother, David, is in town this week. And that after the Pelicans game, despite the Lakers winning by 21, there were still things after the game that he was going over and sort of paranoid about. And his brother was like, why are you upset? You guys just won. And he's like, there's always things that we could be doing better. And I think the Lakers saw some of those things in this game, and I will be touching on those in one of my takeaways. But, to kind of just loosely go over it, they're without Rui. Austin comes back, but Austin was clearly not himself. Went 2 for 13 tonight, 8 points. Drew the Jalen Brunson assignment, and Jalen Brunson was cooking him. It was a really rough welcome back for Austin tonight, though he did hit that big 3-pointer in OT. But they're down Rui, who played, remember, he played a critical role in their win over New York on February 1st. So did Max. They were also without Max, obviously, now that he's gone, but he did a pretty good job against Jalen Brunson, especially in the fourth. And Rui was a big part of guarding Cat. He's defended Cat well during his Lakers tenure and can often handle that matchup one-on-one. But with the way the Lakers were defending them, it was a lot of fronting and swarming and rotating, kind of the blueprint for eventually their Denver game plan. So they really missed Rui tonight because basically no one could hit a shot for the first 3.5 quarters outside of LeBron and Luka. Even with this game going to overtime, the Lakers only had 4 guys in double figures, and Gabe and Dalton barely got there. Gabe finished with 12 points, hitting all 4 of his threes, but 3 of those came in the fourth quarter, and the Lakers needed every one of them. But Gabe had 3 points through the first 3 quarters, had been a non-factor offensively. Dalton hits that 3 later, to end the third to give LA some momentum. That was a huge shot, gets a big layup in the fourth quarter, but like he had been relatively quiet through the first 3 quarters or so. So LA was basically being carried by LeBron and Luka. So Austin's back, but he's not himself. That they're missing Rui. They're playing a hungry New York team that they're dealing with this narrative, and they kind of talked about it on the broadcast that the Knicks have not beaten any of the elite teams in the league this season. They've not beaten Boston, they've not beaten Cleveland, and they've not beaten OKC. And so this is a thing that's been weighing on the Knicks and just sort of hanging over their heads that you can't beat the best teams in the league. So I'm sure they looked at this game as Lakers, they're on a 7-game win streak. They're the talk of the NBA right now. Let's go in there and steal one and kind of put this narrative to rest. So the Knicks are coming in, they're hungry. They also lost to the Lakers, obviously, about a month ago. And then in the course of the game, the Lakers are not shooting well. Again, basically everybody's missing shots. New York is playing just as hard, if not harder than them. The Knicks are built similarly to the Lakers with a bunch of long, rangy wings. And if we're being honest, OG Anunoby is basically a better version of Dorian Finney-Smith and Jared Vanderbilt. And then you could throw Mikal Bridges in there and Josh Hart. So they have guys that can match Dorian and Vando and do those types of things on the perimeter, and even are more skilled offensively and could do different things attacking off the dribble and whatnot. So they were able to match the Lakers on the perimeter for the most part. And then Jalen Brunson just did whatever he wanted tonight. That I will touch on that with one of my takeaways, but 39 points, 10 assists. He does go down at the 124 mark of overtime. He suffers a brutal ankle sprain that they showed 100 times on the replay, but 13 for 26. He started 10 for 16. So the Lakers did hold him to 3 of 10 shooting from the middle, late of fourth quarter into overtime, but 12 for 13 at the free throw line and 10 assists to only 3 turnovers. A really dominant and efficient performance from Jalen Brunson. So the Lakers are just dealing with all this stuff that's going against them. I think I'm not one to blame the refs, but I do feel like tonight was Lakers had 7 more fouls called on them, which is rare. They've typically been a low foul team, a low foul defense. The Knicks attempted 4 more free throws than them. They attempted 32 free throws. So I'm never going to be the person to criticize the refs or that's just not my style with analysis. However, I will say I think it went both ways. I thought there were certainly some calls that the Knicks didn't get or that I just felt like it was an oddly reffed game and probably overall it went more against the Lakers than the Knicks. But I think in general, both teams got some bad calls against them, also got some calls that probably should have gone in their favor. So the Lakers are dealing with all this adversity, and based on them, they're about to go on the road. They've won 7 in a row. They could have folded. They could have just been all right, we don't have it tonight. We tried making our comeback late in the third, early fourth. They've withstood everything we've thrown at them. But again, this mental fortitude and this level of resilience that this group has developed over the past, 2 months or so, I think really shine through in this comeback. And this was only the Lakers' second overtime game this season. The first one was the overtime loss in Atlanta, if you remember, when that was part of that stretch where they also lost to Minnesota and Miami. That was that tough trip early in December. But even looking at like this stretch, the Lakers have not had many close games, and that's where I really look at. Like at Portland, they had pretty much settled that one. They blow out Denver. Dallas was they were pretty much in control. Minnesota, same thing. The Clippers games were relatively close down the stretch, but it never really felt like the Lakers were going to lose them. Then they blow out New Orleans, and like this was the first game where they're getting their ass kicked. They're down by double digits. It looks like they're probably going to lose, and they rally. And I think a lot had been building to this, but this was also really their first crunch time with Luka against a good opponent. Again, I don't know if this is like, not trying to shade Dallas or Minnesota or the Clippers, but I don't think they're on the same tier as New York. And even within those games, I don't think they were playing to the level that New York was playing tonight. So this was the first time it's like good team, crunch time, Lakers are facing adversity, and they come out on the other side. They find a way to win. And I think that this makes this one of the best wins of the season. It was certainly one of the most entertaining and just best games to watch of the season for the Lakers. And, I think I sometimes try not to be too hyperbolic with these things. So like I would still say like the Boston win was better. The Denver win was better. Honestly, the first New York game without AD, like they blew them out in that fourth quarter. So there's certainly some games I would put ahead of this one, but this one's like arguably in the top 5, certainly in the top like 7 or 8 on the season. Notable performances. Have to start with Luka. 30 incredible first quarter. He set the tone, had 13 points, and really just did whatever he wanted. And it felt like for some reason they kind of went away from him. I didn't quite understand it, especially in the second half. But 32 points, 7 rebounds, 12 assists, 4 steals, another high steal night. Did have 5 turnovers. Was 9 to 23 from the floor, 4 for 12 on threes, 10 to 12 from the free throw line. Lakers were a team best plus 16 in his 43 minutes. LeBron basically had the same stat line, very similar stat lines, 31 points, 12 rebounds, 8 assists, 1 block, 11 to 23 shooting, 2 of 8 on threes, hit 2 huge threes late in the fourth quarter, 7 of 8 from the free throw line. And then off the bench, Gabe Vincent, 12 points, 4 for 4 from 3. Dalton Connect, 11 points, hit 3 threes. I'll give Jackson a shout out. JJ gave him a big shout out after the game. 8 points, 5 rebounds, 2 blocks for Jackson. And he fouled out in overtime. And then Austin did not have a 8.6 rebounds for Austin, 2 of 13 shooting, obviously, but what a 7 on threes, and the 1 3 he hit was huge. That gave the Lakers some breathing room in overtime. And then stat of the night, I'm going to go with Gabe, 4 for 4 on threes. It felt like he hit a bunch of timely threes, especially obviously in the fourth quarter. All 3 of his fourth quarter threes came in the final 6 minutes. The Lakers actually closed with Gabe over Austin in the fourth. And then JJ said that he wanted to give Gabe a breather to open overtime and then take out Jackson and close with Gabe and Austin, but that Jackson was defending so well and just playing so well that he felt like he couldn't take Jackson out. Then obviously Jackson ends up fouling out anyway, but that was his calculus for the Austin Gabe situation. But it was telling that he went with Gabe over Austin. I think it was a combination of Gabe being the better defensive option, and at that point Austin really struggling on both ends of the floor until he hits the shot in overtime. But Gabe tonight, he entered the game 6 for 35 over his previous 7 games from 3, including going 0 for 6 against the Pelicans. So after, like, Gabe had about a 2-month stretch there where he was shooting about 40% on threes, and more recently he has regressed and been struggling from deep and looked more like the version of him from earlier in the season where he's starting to pass up shots or he's starting to force shots. Like, it feels like his decision making on like what's a good shot versus what's a bad shot has regressed a bit compared to where it was for that stretch. And he's been either overthinking things or forcing things or whatever. But tonight he was awesome. He defended. Like, Brunson is just such a tough cover. I think, frankly, Gabe's just too small for him, though they are similar heights. Like, Brunson needs a bigger defender on him. I thought he was fine as like an innings eater against Brunson, but really the big thing was hitting the 3 threes in the fourth that gave a lifeless Lakers offense some juice and some much needed shot making. And then takeaway number one for me is I'm going to build off of the notion that this was really the first like crunch time chess match for the Lakers with LeBron and Luka against a good opponent. So my first takeaway is margin for error. And this is going to be a callback, which was like the word of the night for JJ. He kept referencing callbacks pregame and then postgame. That was a big theme. But the callback for me is going to be that first Clippers loss at Intuit Dome, where JJ and LeBron both said this group did not have much of a margin for error. And JJ also added to that by saying the Lakers didn't have a player that brought two to the ball, which I've said before I disagree with. But regardless of your thoughts on that, Luka certainly brings two to the ball. But I think the combination of Luka and LeBron, we saw like in crunch time, in the fourth quarter, in overtime, like this combination gives the Lakers such a high floor and such a high ceiling, where as long as the game is relatively close, once you get into crunch time and extracting as much as possible out of each possession, you have two of the best practitioners in the league in Luka and LeBron, two of the best clutch players, two of the best clutch decision makers. They both are threats to obviously score or create opportunities for their teammates. And there's certainly some things that didn't, like, I thought LeBron's last 3-pointer in regulation wasn't a good shot. I felt like he had gotten whatever he wanted, especially in the first half, getting downhill, and he kind of went away from that a little bit more. And I don't know if he just got tired or what it was, but it felt like when he went down, like when he got downhill against the Knicks and charged Towns, like he was able to draw fouls, get to the rim, get high percentage looks, and he didn't do that as much in the second half. But he did hit the 2 threes, and just like him hitting those shots, him and Luka creating the shots for Gabe and for Dalton and just for Austin. But then also Luka doing his thing off the dribble to open overtime. Like you just saw that this is going to be a really tough team to beat in a close game. I think you're going to have to kill these guys, beat them by like 10, 15 points. And look, there will be some close games that they lose. You're not going to win every close game you play. But I felt like tonight was a nice reminder that like, oh yeah, when they really need to score, it's Luka and LeBron going up against Jalen Brunson. And Jalen Brunson had an amazing game and ultimately got injured. But the Lakers it was easier for LA to game plan their defense. And you saw like that final possession in regulation, they double Brunson. They force him to catch the ball near half court. They double him. He has to dish to Josh Hart. Then they charge at him. He has to put the ball on the floor, and then time expires. He doesn't get the shot off. So I feel like with the Lakers, it's like they have two heads of the snake, and really even Austin, we've seen him make countless clutch shots and big plays. Like he could be that third guy, obviously not tonight. So it's just like tonight, what was, I think, a preview of what this offense can become, especially in crunch time. And even against a team that has on paper multiple wing defenders, OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart, like these are guys who have been all defense guys or in that conversation. And it didn't matter against LeBron and Luka. They were able to target Cat and Brunson and even score on Bridges and Anunoby and Hart. So I think tonight was a good test for the Lakers crunch time offense. And I thought for the most part, they passed it again. I think became a little too jump shot heavy and were relying like that. Like New York started to pack the paint and sometimes send two to the ball. And like LA, I think there's certainly ways they could attack that better, but they got the results. And I think sometimes you just get bailed out by stars making big shots. And it felt like LeBron and Luka did some of that, but that's what comes with having superstars on your team. Takeaway number 2, I'm going to call back to JJ Redick's pregame comments about some of the concerns during the win streak. And I think tonight highlighted some of the flaws with the Lakers, some of their weaknesses. and things that I think smart teams will try to exploit in the future. And some of these things are things that I think are just roster issues and roster limitations. Some of these things are game planning things and can be adjusted. But I thought it was interesting that tonight, JJ called out 3 things before the game. He said, we got to keep them out of transition. We got to keep them off the offensive glass. And we have to defend Brunson well in pick and rolls and ISOs. And the Lakers kind of went 0 for 3 in all 3 of those points of emphasis. Brunson drops 39 and 10 and doesn't play the final minute and a half because he gets injured. So we don't know what would have happened had he remained out there. The Knicks get 14 offensive rebounds, which is a lot. And the Lakers were better later in the game, but still 14 is too many to allow. And the Knicks had, I am pulling it up here quickly, they had 17 fast break points, which actually they had 12 in the first half. So LA did a much better job in the second half with that. But 17 is still like a little high. And the Lakers gave up 15 points off of their 17 turnovers. So part of that is transition or early offense stuff. So like they were certainly better in the second half. And I do think like they deserve credit for Jackson's defense, LeBron's defense, DFS, even Luka, Austin, Gabe, like those guys all made some big defensive plays and were part of some key defensive stretches. But in my opinion, they kind of went 0 for 3 on those 3 things, or maybe like 0.5 out of 3. And that to me like highlighted some of the concerns with this group, which I talked about it after the New Orleans game. But right now, I think the 2 weak spots in the Lakers defensive, I guess, just the Lakers defensive coverage, we'll say, are small, shifty, quick ball handlers. And I think like scorers, particularly forwards or bigs, who can really put pressure on the rim. So Zion was obviously couldn't really do anything to stop him. Brunson was a similar thing where I think Vando, DFS, LeBron, even Gabe, like I just don't think those guys are well equipped to guard a player like this. DFS, Vando, and LeBron, I think, are much better against wings and bigs. And Gabe, I think, is too small to truly bother Jalen Brunson. So the Lakers were able to collapse on him, leverage help situations with like Jackson and like shrink the floor. And that's ultimately, I think, the way they have to navigate this moving forward. And I think there are things they did well in the second half. But like the initial coverages of trying to kind of keep one guy in front of Brunson or rear view contest or like, and I will acknowledge Brunson and Zion are both like unique cases that there might not be another player in the league that plays exactly like either one of them. So those might specifically be New Orleans and New York issues. But Brunson basically did whatever he wanted. I did not think it was unsustainable. I thought most of his foul calls, like the one on Austin late, obviously, that he got injured on, I don't think was a foul. But most of his foul calls, I thought were reasonable, especially based on some of the calls that Luka and LeBron got. And he just basically was like, DFS is too slow to guard him. Gabe's too small. LeBron, you want more as like a low man roamer helper or guarding one of the wings. And Vando got some shifts on him, but I thought he got good shots against Vando too. So I think this is the like Austin, I think will help a little bit once he's back to being more of himself. Like tonight, I just don't think he had it. But this is where Max Christie was huge for them. They never really replaced this position. I wonder if Jordan Goodwin could have been useful as a bigger guy who maybe gets the Brunson assignment if he was healthy. But I think the last couple of games to me have showed like those are the 2 player archetypes or like player skill types that I think will give the Lakers problems. I think other players, like we'll see against Boston, Tatum and Brown or Tatum and Brown. So I'm sure they'll have good games, but like, I think that the tougher players for them are going to be the quick shift. Like Kyrie was another example in the Dallas game. Those like lightning quick guards, I don't think they have a great answer for. And then I think it'll probably be similar with Giannis, like the hyper athletic, strong power forwards that can drive from the perimeter and put pressure on the rim, I think those guys are going to give them problems too. And then, as I mentioned earlier, like their wings could match the Lakers' wings in terms of size and tenacity and energy and all that stuff. So like they got like Josh Hart, 5 offensive rebounds. OG had 1, Mikhail had 1, and even Miles McBride had a couple. So like I part of that's just like how the Knicks play. Part of that is the culture that Thibodeau has created. But I think we kind of saw like the Lakers have that athleticism or wing advantage on a lot of teams, especially without Rui. I'm not like this was a matchup that I actually felt like the Knicks matched them or were better than them in that way in for a lot of the game. And then takeaway number 3 for me is the non-stars step up in a timely way. And I did touch on this a bit in the notable performers, but I just felt like Gabe hitting the shots that he hit, Dalton, who has been playing progressively better the last few games, really hit like that. JJ, again, for another called back to the Sacramento game, the third game of the season, when Dalton, remember, hit a buzzer beater to end that third quarter as the Lakers were making their comeback. Then LeBron took over in the fourth and they won that game. So, I think Dalton and Gabe, like their total or their overall shooting looked good, but that was because they made a bunch of shots like late in the game. But Trey Jemison, what was their third leading scorer for like most of the first half with 5 points and then 7. So I thought he came in, gave them some good minutes, picked up some fouls. Vando was making a difference, 2 steals, 1 block. Austin again hit the big 3. Jackson, I thought defensively was really good, helping and helping off of Towns. And even guarding Josh Hart and like just being a roamer, being a helper. I thought he was very disruptive. And then DFS just did DFS things. He had that tip dunk early in the game, missed that 3 late, but like he's a dog and he competes. And like this is a playoff like game that he fit in perfectly. So this one's a shorter one, but I just think like it started off as a rough performance for the supporting cast for most of the first 3 quarters. And then several guys, notably Gabe, Dalton, and Jackson, really stepped up in big ways. And again, I think it's kind of like a seesaw where Luka and LeBron kept them around, kept this from being a blowout for the first 3 quarters. Then those guys, late third into fourth, make some big plays to keep the Lakers around, to help them make that comeback. And then LeBron and Luka ultimately finish off the Knicks. So another all-around impressive win for the Lakers. Again, 40-21. They're the number 2 seed in the West. They are the hottest team in the conference. Not the hottest team in the NBA, technically, because Cleveland's won, 12 in a row. But all think like 20-4 over the past 24 games. That is the best record in the NBA. They entered tonight, best defense, 6th best offense. I'm sure those numbers will still be similar. So a lot of positives right now for the Lakers. But let's get into the Q&A here. I see we got the first one from Oi the Boy. Go Lakers. The refs are trying to job us. WTF. As I said earlier, like I don't like being the refs guy, especially because if we're being honest and we're being objective here, like the Lakers, I think in general get a pretty good whistle. I think LeBron doesn't get a good whistle, but I think outside of LeBron, like Luka gets a pretty good whistle. Austin gets a pretty good whistle. Like the Lakers are continually, like part of that is their style of play. So I'm not trying to say they're taking free throws that they shouldn't be taking, but the Lakers are, I think, a hard team to ref because of how much they attack the rim, how much pressure they put on defenses, and how much physicality and just contact there is. It goes back to like when refs would talk about how difficult it was to ref Shaq, or I think reffing LeBron or reffing Giannis. Like I think the Lakers are almost like the team version of that. Now, I will say I did feel like there were certainly some stretches that went against them that were questionable. So I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just like never, just kind of my basketball philosophy. Like I'm really going to try to refrain from blaming the refs because it just feels like one of those things that's kind of out of your control. You can control boxing out, rotating, making shots, making the extra pass. Like there are certain things you can control. You can't control how the refs ref a game. So I think part of that is also who initiates contact first. And I thought that the Knicks brought a level of physicality that kind of set the tone and gave them a slight advantage. But to your point, certainly there were some parts where I didn't think it was the best refereeing I've ever seen. Chris Jarvina, thank you for the super chat. If they go 50 before 29, does that make them an exception to the 40-20 rule because of the roster shakeup? It's a good question. I think so. Like I would not. The interesting thing with this group is if you go back through recent NBA history, even like post millennium, which I've said that before, and some people have. So post 2000, if we just go look at post 2000, really the only team to win a championship that made a significant trade in season, at least off the top of my head, and I've had this conversation with multiple people before, and this is kind of the one exception we come to, is the 2004 Detroit Pistons traded for Rasheed Wallace. They already had that core in place with Ben Wallace, Chauncey Billups, Rip Hamilton, Tayshaun Prince, but they acquire Rasheed Wallace in the middle of the 2003-2004 season. They go on to win the title. Otherwise, it's typically bench players that get acquired by a championship team, maybe a buyout player, maybe a free agent during the middle of the season, or obviously some teams like the 07-08 Celtics remake their group, that the summer before, or the 2009 Lakers obviously remake their group with the Powell trade the season before, then they go to the finals and they lose in the finals. So like, point being, like Dallas was almost kind of broke that mold with how much they remade their roster last season, but obviously Boston won. So point being, like, I think that the interesting thing with what the Lakers are up against is they're up against, like, most of the time historically when you make this significant of a trade, and this is even an exception because this is arguably the biggest trade in NBA history, but like when you acquire like a star or like a high level starter that really changes how you play, typically you don't win the championship. And then if you do eventually win a championship, it's like the following season, you make a couple more tweaks, you have more time together, then you win the championship. So I think throwing out even the 40-20 rule, if the Lakers won the championship, this would buck some recent NBA history of like, you typically don't make a big trade and then like a big trade mid-season. Obviously, again, going back to like the previous summer, there have been plenty of situations where you make a trade before training camp, then you go into the season with that group and like you form into a championship team. But most championship teams don't have like 30 games together before they win the championship. It's got to be at least a full season, if not more. The Pistons are an exception. And even then, it was more fitting Rasheed Wallace into what they were already doing. They already had 4 of the 5 starters set in place. That he didn't really change. Like he certainly, I thought at times was their second best player during that stretch, second or third. But I think like he didn't change it as much as like Luka changes the Lakers. Like he's coming in, he's now the leading ball handler, the leading scorer, or him and LeBron are right there. But like I think ultimately it will be Luka. So. My point with all this is just that I think with the Lakers, you do have to throw out the 40-20 rule and like any precedent, because this group is so much different post-trade and even like post-January 15th than they were before then. And they made a significant change mid-season that, again, kind of bucks what we've seen from recent NBA history, where typically those teams don't end up winning the title. So if the Lakers win the title, I think that this would buck a couple things, because it would buck the 40-20 rule, and it would also buck some of the previous seasons where like teams just don't make that big of a trade. Like even I guess Cleveland in 2016 made like the Shumpert, J.R. Smith, but I wouldn't. I mean, that's you can't compare that to trading for Luka. Like, and I wouldn't even compare that to trading for Rasheed. So there's degrees to it. Like you can make relatively big moves, but in terms of adding like a star, it just rarely happens where that team goes on to still win the title. So that would be, to me, the more interesting thing is like, can the Lakers defy that conventional, NBA norm? Braden, thank you for the super chat. Hey, Brate, this felt like one of those rough games. Our threes weren't falling, but I kept looking at the score thinking, oh, well, we are still within striking distance. And boom, Luka brought us back. Beautiful. Yeah. I mean, couldn't have really said it better myself. Like, this was a rough game. A lot of things were going against the Lakers, and they still found a way to get it done. And like, that's what championship teams do. That's what contenders do. So again, this is just another feather in their cap in terms of their contender profile. Sean, thank you for the super chat. What a win in all caps. This team has me fired up right now. They're taking punches all night and they fought back. Lots of clutch shots late in the fourth, especially from Gabe. Love that they shut down Cat. Yeah, that was I didn't really talk about that, and I'm glad you brought that up. Now part of it I think is Cat and some of his self-inflicted wounds and you know they still won the trade because Julius Randle, that has not gone well in Minnesota. But Cat tonight, 12 points, 14 rebounds, but went 3 for 13 from the floor, 1 for 6 on threes. And I thought they did a great job on him. So credit to Jackson, credit to LeBron, credit to DFS, credit to Vando. Really, all those guys spent some time on him and did a really good job. Dotun, thank you for the super chat. Can we ask JJ again about this many freelance offense they're running damn near unguardable when we run actual sets? Brunson's whistle is disgusting. Yeah, I mean, you're probably right. Like, I know people, the Brunson whistle is a bit, maybe I was being a little generous there to him, but yeah, it's something that I can ask. I want to ask. I haven't been there the last 2 games, so I've missed 4 opportunities to ask JJ questions, unfortunately. Both pre-games, both post-games, but I will be there in Boston no matter what. I have my flight tomorrow, and I want to ask him about LeBron Luka. I still have not seen anyone ask him about that, so I want to ask about the 2-man game, but this is also near the top of my list of questions I want to ask JJ. RGN Cal 4, Austin, thank you for the super chat. Austin did not handle the ball. He's still hurt. Yeah, I mean, I was not criticizing Austin earlier. I was just stating the fact that like he just didn't have it tonight, but clearly he was not himself physically on either side of the ball. And I think that's like, I wouldn't be surprised if knowing Austin that he tried to rush this back and like probably played a little too prematurely, but he hit the big shot in overtime. Like, that's what he does. And was definitely more off the ball than normal with tonight's game. Ryan Mitchell, thank you for the super chat. Loved AD, but his skill set is expendable nowadays. Yes and no. Like, I still think there's an element of like he could do a lot of what Jackson does, but like at an even higher level. Like, he's a better rim protector. He's a better rebounder. I know some of the rim protection data has not, like, he's not been the same level of defender this season for sure. And the offense, the jumper has been inconsistent. And then ultimately he's not healthy. Like, that's the biggest thing to me is this has been lingering since the Philly injury, and he came back and then re-aggravated it. So it's like, that was clearly a serious injury that, had the Lakers not made this trade, probably like ruins their season or knocks it off course, right? Because like, imagine right now just having Max instead of Luka, and then just not having AD and like having the same group. Like, this group looks a lot different, especially for the stretch that like Austin and Rui are out. Like, I'm not going to retroactively like take back those injuries. So like, just assume like they didn't do the Luka trade and they have backs and AD's out. It's like, yeah, this team I think looks much different right now, and they're probably maybe at best the 6th seed, but maybe even in the play-in mix. Like, some of the bottom of the West has been so bad that I think they with LeBron, with Austin, they had been playing well. They had been winning without AD. I don't think they're playing as well as they like. I don't think they would have been playing as well as they currently are, especially because Luka has looked so great, like the Denver game, for example. But I think the bigger thing was AD. With AD was just like the injury ultimately, to me, regardless of how you felt about AD, regardless of how close you felt he was to Luka, or maybe because let's take a step back here, right? Because Luka's first few games, like, I was getting questions on here about did the Lakers give up too much, or was it are they going to regret this, or like this, or there was a lot Luka's conditioning and this and that, and like, I try to preach patience. I don't know why I can never say that. But the big thing to me was like, regardless of how you felt about Luka, regardless of how you felt about AD was seriously injured. And that's kind of the other parts of this that I know people have touched on it now, but like it was true at the time. AD was injured when they traded him. And like I wonder if like Dallas or even the Lakers kind of knew how serious that injury was. If Dallas like potentially just calls off the trade, because for as much as they maybe wanted to get off Luka, like I think the fact that they traded for an injured AD, he tries to play and plays well the first 2+ quarters, then re-aggravates it and now is potentially out the rest of the season. Like that's where things just really went off the rails. Although just making the trade in general, it was really not the smartest move for Dallas. D'Lo, strongest soldier, thank you for the super chat. If Austin even plays mid instead of bottom 5 game in his career, we win comfortably. Also LeBron up to 25 points per game on the season for 21 straight. Incredible stat there for LeBron. Yeah, I mean Austin, like, but I think it goes both ways, right? Because people like wanted Austin, like I think everyone would rather have had Austin than not had Austin, but him coming back does risk obviously him not look like we saw it with Luka. Obviously it took him a couple games to be like, some guys, not everyone's a cyborg like LeBron who can miss a game, come back and just look like LeBron. So I think normal players come back and need some time to reacclimate. And I think with Austin, I mean, he doesn't get a break because now they go to Boston and he's going to be facing Derek White and Drew Holiday. But I think Austin, like, to your point, if he does have just a normal game for Austin, I do think they win this game. And I actually liked, he wasn't handling the ball as much, but I did understand JJ's decision to go to him at least for a little bit in overtime, because the Lakers offense was just so stagnant. And it really was like LeBron and Luka, and they kept sending two to the ball and shading over. And it was just like, the Lakers didn't really have anyone else who could do anything off the dribble out there. Like, not Jackson, not DFS, not Gabe. So, or at least they weren't doing it. So it was like, at least adding in Austin, like added another threat. And then he didn't really do much off the ball, but he did hit that 3 in the corner. Patrick Michael, why so much? Thank you for the super chat. Why so much freelance offense over organized sets? I wish I had a better answer for you. I also think that based on JJ's answers to the questioning, whenever he's gotten this, like they clearly are tracking it in a different way. And so I'm not quite sure what they consider freelance versus organized. And maybe that might be actually the question is not why the freelance over the organized, but how do you define it? And then learning how he defines it might give us some clarity into his perspective, because I feel like there might be a communication breakdown between at least how the media and fans are perceiving it and maybe how they're perceiving it internally. And I know Kranjis has obviously been the one leading this charge, but he's talked about like the way he calculates it and the number that JJ threw out that one time that he was asked about it. And it was like, those were not even in the same ballpark. So I don't like, maybe JJ was just throwing out a number to throw out a number. I feel like he's pretty dialed in and calculated with all that stuff. So I don't think he was just like, there's plenty of times he rattles off a number off the top of his head and it's mostly been accurate. So I am interested more so in like how they calculate it or how they determine it, because I think that can give us some insight into the whole freelance versus organized. My read would be, I think they've simplified things a little bit for Luka. I think we've seen since Luka has gotten there, there's been a decrease in organized offense. And I think for them, they kind of might just view it as like, well, if we run, and I'm not even sure also how exactly Kranjis is calculating it. Like I know there's some obvious ones where like they run a set and that is organized offense, but like I wonder if the Lakers kind of view it as like, well, if we have two guys in the corner, one guy on the weak side wing, and someone comes up to screen for Luka, that's an organized offensive set for us. Like it doesn't have all the bells and whistles maybe as like a Spain pick and roll or a double drag or Chicago or horns or whatever action you want to call, but like maybe they consider that not just a freelance play. And I'm not sure if that's probably what we're talking to Crane just about too. And I will be sure to DM him after this, and I should have him on my show soon. But it's a good question, and I think to me, I'm more interested personally in like how they determine freelance versus organized. Because again, I think there are some possessions that are clearly freelance, some possessions that are clearly organized, and then some positions that are kind of in the middle. And I wonder possessions, and then I wonder if like maybe they are viewing some of those as more organized when to the eye it does not come off that way. Oida Boy, 95 Rockets. Thank you for the super chat. 95 Rockets traded for Clyde midseason and won. So that's why I specified 2000 and more recently. So you're going back to 95. That's 30 years ago. I think a lot has changed with like teams and team building but like, yeah, I mean, that is a good example. But it's rare. Like, again, we're pulling 95 and 2004. We're in 2025. So most of the time teams don't make big trades and win the championship. But I to be clear, I'm not saying the Lakers can't win the championship. I very much have been out there saying the Lakers can win the championship. I still think they can win the championship. I'm just saying, like, from if we're taking like history and context and how these things have worked, NBA history would suggest they probably don't win the championship this year, make a couple tweaks in the offseason, and then win the championship next year. Assuming LeBron can continue to play at this level and Luka continues to ascend. So, but I very much think they can, just to be clear. Ahmed Braun, thank you for the super chat. First time we faced some adversity in a while. Showed some championship DNA tonight. Great win. # Lake Show. 100% agree with you. That was the point of my overarching thought. That was also the point of my first takeaway. Like, the margin for error has increased with LeBron and Luka, and they faced some adversity. They got punched in the mouth a few times, and they punched back, and they won the fight. Rolla, thank you for the super chat. Yo, would you rest LeBron last 3 to 4 games if it meant drop to 3 to 5th, or depends on who we are playing, or no rest to stay to try staying at 2? Flex emoji, Laker grit. So happy to see. This is hard for me to answer without a little bit more context to the situation. So I know in general they are tracking the players' like health metrics and when they feel like guys need rest and what capacity they're at. So I would say if there is a material difference in LeBron, I doubt they rest him for 3 to 4 games. I doubt LeBron goes for that. LeBron hates resting, despite I know there's been a narrative out there that he, because he took the 2 weeks off to go to Miami in like his first Cleveland season. Like he hates load management. He hates resting. I could maybe see like 1 game and maybe like if they're locked up, if they've locked up the 2 seed, maybe they rest them a couple games to like close the year. But I can maybe see 1. The other thing I've been thinking about more recently is like OKC has a 10 game advantage in the loss column. So actually when the Lakers play OKC, maybe only one of those games is competitive in terms of OKC playing their guys. Like at that point in the season, they're going to be so far ahead of the rest of the conference that they could probably rest their guys like the final 5, 6, 7 games of the season and be okay and not be in jeopardy of losing the number 1 seed. It might affect them in terms of the battle with Cleveland for the overall number 1 seed and who would have home court in that potential finals. But I wonder if OKC just like kind of punts at least 1, if not both of those games against the Lakers. And it also would add like a element of mystery to that potential series in the second round or the conference finals, because then we would have never seen like the LeBron, the Luka Lakers go up against the Thunder. We would have only seen like the late November Lakers go up against the Thunder. So that's one thing that's been on my mind. But in general, I would say go for it, but go for it within reason, right? So again, if well, I'm just going to throw out some numbers here. Let's say you can rest LeBron one game and you get him. It's like he plays and he's at 80% physical capacity, or he can rest and get up to like 90%. I say rest him, get up to 90% for the playoffs, and if you fall a seed, you fall a seed. But if it's like 80% versus 81%, 82%, and I know like they do calculate it like with percentages and like they have their internal calculations, but if it's like that marginal of a difference, I think that's maybe where I just say like I'll give it up to I'll leave it up to the player, let them decide what they want to do, and if LeBron wants to play, LeBron gets to play, and I assume he would play. So I think to me it kind of depends on where he's at physically, the opponent, because I know they play Portland late, that they have Houston, at Dallas, at OKC twice. So those are some big games. At OKC could be big depending on what they're doing, but I assume they're going to rest at least one of the games. Houston is a big one potentially for that 2 to 5 spot. Dallas is obviously the Luka return game, and then Portland, they could be fighting for the 10 seed at that point. So like they might have something to play for. So there's a lot to be determined the rest of the season, but in general, I would probably err on just playing LeBron. And I think more importantly, that's what he wants, and he's probably going to get what he wants. D'Lo, strongest soldier, thank you for the super chat. The 3-point woes definitely showed Rui's value. Yeah, I mean, I touched on it, but worth touching on again. Like I thought they really missed Rui tonight, more so offensively than defensively, but he would have helped just be another big front court body, and obviously has defended Towns well. Like they ultimately defended Towns reasonably well, so they didn't necessarily miss him in that context. But with the way he's been defending, the way he's been rebounding, and I think more importantly, the cutting and the 3-point shooting, those are two areas they really missed him. So yeah, they cannot. And tomorrow is the reassessment date for Rui, so Lakers will have their injury report come out, I guess, in the afternoon, early afternoon, and that's when we'll know what his status is for Saturday. Brian Rhymes, thank you for the super chat. Lakers are the only team to get criticized after a win. National national media, #thank you, Nico. Yeah, I mean, that's just kind of how it goes. I hope you're not, I don't think you're saying I'm criticizing them. I hope you don't take my earlier points as criticism. Like I think there are some, like, no team is perfect, no roster is perfect. So for me, like, part of what I try to do is analyze some of the weaknesses, some of the flaws. So I did, kind of pick through some of the things that didn't go right tonight. But I hope, you're not throwing me in that in terms of the criticism. Because I think overwhelming tonight was like a positive situation. Like they're almost playing with house money, where had they lost based on all the things that went against them, I would have been like, hey, like they played a team that was desperate, that needed the win, that needed to beat a good team. They had the free throw and foul situations go against them. No Rui. Austin had an off night. No one could really make a shot. I would not have blamed the Lakers if they lost tonight, but the fact that they won really speaks to the resilience, the mental fortitude, and just the championship mentality that I think this group has developed over the past 2 months. Chris Jarvina, thank you for the super chat. Only 3 teams won a chip without one of their 2 players without one of their top 2 players previously reaching the conference finals. None of the top 2 on Cleveland or OKC have done that. Can they buck that trend? By the way, it's pronounced Jarvina. Okay. Chris Jarvina. Thanks. Look, people butcher my name all the time, so I appreciate a good pronunciation breakdown. That's a good point. And OKC was, I think that there's a little bit of revisionist history on how decidedly Dallas won the OKC semifinal series. I think that was a little bit closer than people remember. And remember, they had the foul final possession that cost OKC, and like I think that they went through some learning curves or learning moments and a bit of a just growth curve, we'll say. So I think, to your point, like what Cleveland and OKC are doing is really interesting, because I think the teams that they have been lumped in with, like the 2017 Warriors, the 96 Bulls, the 72 Lakers, like those teams had, to your point, like gone through the playoff wars, and Golden State had already won a title. Then they had Kevin Durant, who's like arguably the most plug and play superstar ever. You just need to run off screen actions for him, or just give him the ball at the top of the key and let him cook someone in an ISO. And he fit in perfectly there. 96 Bulls, one of the best teams of all time. You have Jordan still in his prime, and Pippen and all those guys. So, and they had won together, or parts of it. Still have Phil Jackson, like going back to West and Baylor, and or I guess that was post Baylor, but West and Chamberlain, whatever. Point being, like the teams that are in the same rare air in terms of like point differential and net rating had all been in the mix before, and either won championships or made finals or made conference finals. So Cleveland and OKC would be bucking that trend, to your point. I'm still picking Boston to come out of the East. I've been saying that. I know Cleveland just beat them. I know they've looked better progressively against them throughout the course of the season. I still would favor Boston to come out of the East. I'm not like that one. I'm not, budging on, barring injury for them. I'm not changing my opinion on that until maybe later in the, like, we'll see end of season, early playoffs. Maybe I change my mind, but like for now, I'm rolling with Boston to come out of the East. And then OKC, I do think should be the favorites to come out of the West, but I think with the way that the Lakers are playing, and maybe if we get one Lakers Thunder competitive game to end the season, like that'll give us some more insight into like how the Lakers actually match up with them. But to your point, that would be like them trying to buck that trend. And like, I do think people are being far too dismissive of both teams, and it's just because we like to believe in things. But like at some point, like, and I'm not trying to compare them to any of these teams, but it was like, at some point, like the Lakers kept getting swept in the late 90s. And yes, they had more experience together maybe, but like eventually they broke through, they made the finals, and they won 3 in a row. And I'm not saying Cleveland or OKC is going to do that, but I think like you kind of don't believe in a team until you eventually do, until they prove you wrong. And I think both of these teams are capable of proving us wrong and winning a title. Oi to boy. Thank you for the super chat. Raptors got Gasol midseason and won. That's a good one. I would still contend that he didn't change their team as much as like Luka changed this Lakers team, but he's probably in a similar range to like a Rasheed Wallace. So that's a really good one. Brian Rhyme says, LOL, nah, Jovan, you're the man. Okay, I appreciate you. I appreciate that. I just wanted to clarify because I know sometimes people can misconstrue things. Let's see, we're at about an hour. Let's go about 15 more minutes or so. Natalia says, Lakers versus Cleveland finals, who wins? Well, I know one person who's going to be very motivated for that finals, and that is a Mr. LeBron James, who would not want to lose to Cleveland, let's say. But Cleveland's an interesting one because I think in a way they kind of have sort of the blueprint of a team that could give the Lakers some problems, because they have Mobley and Allen, which is a tough front court to match up with. Then they have Garland and Mitchell in the backcourt. And I think Mitchell in particular is a guy that the Lakers are going to have problems guarding. And I just don't like, I don't think they really have the personnel to guard Mitchell. But at the same time, like I don't see how they match up with Luka LeBron on the other end. So like, I don't know. I think the Lakers have a real shot to win that. I'd probably lean Cleveland right now, but I also think I made this point before, but if we're talking like a hypothetical finals matchup for the Lakers, right? Think about it this way. If the Lakers make the finals, they have won 3 playoff series, and they have probably beaten OKC and potentially also beaten Denver. So like that Lakers team is like, they've gelled, they've become a juggernaut. They've beaten maybe the two best teams in the West en route to the finals. Like, I think like the psychology behind it is a big part of it too, where we're not like, it's one thing if it's like, okay, tomorrow Lakers and Cavs play, who wins that series? I think it's probably Cleveland in like 6 maybe. But if it's early to mid June and the Lakers have another 3 months together and they've beaten OKC in a series and they've beaten Denver in a series, now all of a sudden their confidence and their belief and the way that group has gelled and like been through some wars, at least in that postseason, I think that gives them a much better shot to win that. So I think it'd be pretty close. I mean, again, putting the Lakers in that scenario of like how well they would have had to have played to get there, I might even consider taking the Lakers. I think it's tough. I'm seeing the chat. Jano, what up, man? Do you think there's any truth to the rumor that about the Lakers being interested in Kevin Durant this offseason? I like KD, but it would take too much to get him. I have not heard anything about the Lakers being interested in Kevin Durant. I think that might just be a situation where someone throws the Lakers out there to get, to get some buzz with it. If we're being honest, and you got to think about like the Lakers, like what a hypothetical trade for KD would have to be. It would have to be something like Austin, Rui, Dalton, Gabe, and maybe like Kleba. Like I'd have to look at the money, but like loosely something like that, and a pick and a couple swaps. And like even then, that's a lot for like Lakers are basically giving up everything that they could trade essentially in that, which for KD, you can make that case. But like if you're Phoenix, if you have an open bidding, at least with like multiple teams for KD, you can get more than that. Like at its core, it's basically Austin, Rui, Dalton, a pick and 2 pick swaps. I think you could get more for KD. And because also remember, it's probably not a valuable pick and it's probably not valuable pick swaps. Like the Lakers 2031 pick, Luka's going to be what? 32. He should still be pretty good. You potentially have a second star there. The pick swaps in the late 2020s also should not be very good pick swaps. So like they're not worth nothing, but you almost look at it as like, okay, Austin, Rui, and Dalton plus like some lower value picks or 1 pick and 2 pick swaps. Can I get something better than that? Probably. So I don't even really see how this like works for the Lakers to pull off. Like I don't see why Phoenix would do that unless KD specifically says I want to go there. But I would also caution KD's my fellow Libra, but I think he's one of the top 12 player ever. The track record, the way things ended in Golden State, the way things ended in Brooklyn, the way things are ending in Phoenix, it's like at some point it's kind of hard not to kind of look at that as a bit of a red flag. Mint Millions, you see LeBron talk to Stephen A. Thoughts? Did they have a conversation? I know Stephen A. was courtside. I didn't see them talk. I didn't. L.A. Jovan, were you sitting near Stephen A? So I did not see this. I did not know he Will Smith. He Will Smith him. I was not at the game, so for those who are catching up, I'm still sick. So I missed the last 2 games, unfortunately. So you got one here from Fang Charlie. Hey, Jovan, what's your plans for the next few days? When you leave for Boston, these next few days should be great material for a vlog. Also looking forward to the pod. I'm leaving tomorrow. I'm flying out at 1 to Boston, and then I get in at like, I guess 9:30, 10, something like that. And yeah, got well, it's down there, so I'm not gonna go off camera to get it. But I got the DJI Osmo Pocket 3 for vlogging, so I'm gonna use that to vlog at games and in the wild. And yeah, we still got to figure out the pod date. I don't know my schedule yet. I probably won't know it until later in the month, to be honest. D'Lo, strongest soldier. Thank you for the super chat. Okay, LeBron apparently after the game confronted Stephen A. I mean, look, I'm not trying to insert myself in any media beef here, especially with arguably the most powerful player in the NBA and the most powerful media person in the business. But that, yeah, I think there's been a little bit of an agenda there. I think we could say that, and I understand where LeBron is coming from. Excuse me. Michael D. Clutch shot making. Thank you for the super chat. Bailed out. Poor offensive performance of the first 3 quarters. Lots of ISOs and no movement. Regardless, probably a top 3 game all year. Certainly an element of that. Like I would say, I think that the Gabe shots and I would say mainly the Gabe shots, and then like those I thought were they were. A couple of them were late in the shot clock and not the best offensive like the offensive process continues to leave a bit, to be desired. So I'm not going to deny that, but I think it was nice to see that the Lakers have that margin for error where they could not play a good offensive game. They could miss a lot of good shots and they could still find a way to win. So, and to your point, like, yeah, probably was a top 3. Ahmed Braun, we have the blueprint to beat OKC. Luka and LeBron dictate the pace that series is going to be played at. Make it a half court series and hunt matchups. And thank you for the super chat. I think that is the blueprint to beat them. I think the one thing with OKC, in my opinion, is like they can throw out some really good defensive lineups. Like I think it is maybe a series where like Wallace might be a little bit too small. Like that's probably a guy they're going to mismatch hunt. But when you're talking about Hartenstein, Chet, J-Dub, Shea, Caruso, Dort, those are like 6 guys that, I mean, I'm not like LeBron and Luka are LeBron and Luka, so I'm not saying those guys are going to shut them down, but they're also not like defensive sieves. They're not like guys you can necessarily just like hunt. I think Shea is obviously on the slender side, so that's a guy that Luka and LeBron could both post up, and I think could attack like backing him down. But I think it's more so to me like their team defense is pretty good and they don't have many weaknesses. I guess like they don't have a bunch of like long rangy wings, but like Caruso and Dort are arguably pound for pound the 2 best perimeter defenders in the league. Like you can make that case. So that mixed with Chet, like they got the perimeter guys and they got 2 beasts in the back. So I think if anything, actually, to make my OKC point quickly, my concern with OKC in a Lakers matchup or just them in general is the offensive end. I don't know if I trust J-Dub and Chet and their shooting to get it done. I trust their defense. I think their defense is going to be awesome. And I think they could win rock fights. And I think they have the personnel to like honestly do some similar things to the Lakers, but like they have better individual defenders. So I think people point to the defense more, and I actually flip it and say more to me like, can J-Dub be a true number 2, or can Chet be a true number 2? Like how does that kind of work out? And then really, if you look at it, there's like a big gap to whoever number 4 is for them offensively, and that they're an average to below average shooting team. So you combine all that, and I'm like, do they have enough offensive firepower, especially when come playoff time, teams are going to key in on Shea and do everything they can to make his life difficult. Can they make teams pay for that? Or is it kind of similar to like the Knicks with Brunson? Although I would even argue like, I guess Chet and J-Dub versus like Towns and I'm low on Towns. I'm maybe the wrong guy to talk about Towns, but Towns, Bridges, and Anunoby, like, I mean, you can make a case, I guess New York has even more offensive firepower. I don't think that's crazy. L.A. Jovan, are you tight with Big Waz with the Ringer? Let him come on the pod. I am tight with him. I've done his show a couple times. We've talked about him coming on. I'm not quite sure their policy, so I don't want to speculate, but yeah, I would love to have him on, and anyone else from the Ringer for that matter. Okay, catching up. Ken Carter, always the most introspective questions. Thank you for the question here. Jovan, I remember you saying you had to remove your fandom to become a beat writer. How was the process like? Was it hard? Did you ever have any relapses where your fandom came out? I would say, like, for me, the three moments of like it was hardest, or not fandom, but I would say like the first time I saw Kobe in person, the first time I saw LeBron in person, and the first time I saw Shaq in person. Those were the three times when it was like, okay, like these are the guys. I had their jerseys. I had their posters on my wall. I had like little figurines or bobbleheads of them or whatever. I had their shoes. And now I'm seeing them, in person and like in the press conference with them or in the locker room with them. Cause back then, like, Kobe would talk at his locker. LeBron, they would typically bring the road players out into the hallway. And then Shaq, I missed covering Shaq by a year, but in terms of him still being in the NBA, but I saw him at All-Star Weekend in Toronto, and that was like the coolest thing for me. What was seeing Shaq in person. So because as you guys might know, he's been my favorite player of all time, and also, you know what? Happy birthday to Shaq. It's technically past his birthday, but happy birthday to the Diesel. So I would say, like, more so seeing the players in person, there was an element of like pinching myself, like I made it, like, and just like it, there's a humanizing element to it, right? So I would say that. Otherwise, like, to me, once I asked people for advice and kind of heard what it took in the industry, I think it was a little bit easier for me to kind of do that, because it was just like, okay, like if I want to do this, I have to take this seriously. And I've always been someone who I can kind of do things cold turkey. Like when I want to cut something, when I want to stop doing something, I can do it. And there's been times like I am completely addicted to coffee and I have a bunch of coffee, but like I will go through a stretch where I'll be like, today I'm just like not having coffee, to like prove to myself mentally that I can not have a coffee and like just kind of survive, and I'm typically fine. So I like little stuff like that. Like, I don't know if that's makes me crazy, but I try to like sometimes mentally test myself and be like, hey, I'm always doing this one thing. It's a habit. Let me like try not to do it and prove to myself I'm not like reliant on this. So I think to bring it back to the fandom, it was kind of like, okay, well, Zach Lowe and all the people that I admire in this industry are like not fans of teams or players that maybe they used to be, and they stopped doing it once they started covering it. And like, I'm going to treat this like a job. I'm going to treat this like a career. So that's how I went about that. Mint Millions. Have you ever sports bet? No. Well, not a long time ago, like when I was not since I became a full-time reporter. Early in my career, when I was still an editor and I was more behind the scenes, I did I think 3 bets total. And the funny thing with the betting, This is how betting works. I did like 10 mock bets, and I'm just like, this is what I would pick if I was doing it. I went 7 for 10. Then I did 3 bets, and like one of them was like Chris Paul get. I probably shouldn't have done prop bets, but like one was like Chris Paul get 9 assists in a game. He gets 8 assists in the first half and does not get another assist. It's a blowout. Gets 8 assists in the first half, does not get another assist the rest of the game. Maybe it was like 8.5. Or it was like the over under or something. So I went 0 for 3. And after that, I was like, it was all like, $10-15, very little money. But since I've become an official full-time reporter in 2018, I have not bet. And now that I'm an NBA awards voter, I'm not legally allowed to bet. Stephen Lee, Jovan, what happens in Boston Saturday? Your prediction? Honestly, I think it might come down to Rui. I think if Rui plays, I will pick the Lakers. I think if Rui doesn't play, I will pick Boston. That's kind of where I'm at. I think Rui is a really important piece, especially for that matchup in particular. Kevin Cambridge, do you think the Mavs should shut it down for the season and regroup next year? Yes. This is their season's over. David Parks, I think Denver is a tougher matchup than OKC. You might be right. You could be right. I'm very excited for the next Denver matchup. It is unfortunate it's the second night of a back-to-back because I think the Lakers will have a built-in excuse, and it's a legitimate excuse. Like, I don't think it's really fair. Like, from a results perspective, obviously every game counts, and like you don't want to make excuses, but at the same time, Denver in altitude, second night of a back-to-back after playing Milwaukee is like, Denver might be the hardest place in the league to play the second night of a back-to-back. That's kind of my point. Just like take out like their team just from a physical and like mental perspective. The altitude, like you feel it. Like, if I don't know how many of you have been to Denver, but like you go to Denver, you run, you work out, like you start to feel it in your lungs a little bit quicker. And that's like, to a man, any player I've ever talked about playing in Denver has said that like the first 10 to 15 minutes are always the hardest. That's why sometimes Denver gets out to like, especially against the Lakers, they'd sometimes get out to like the big first quarter leads because it's like the Lakers are still catching their breath and it really hits you. Antonio Rosas, who were the journalists you looked up to before you started? It's a good question. I mean, I think you guys can tell, like Zach Lowe is always kind of been the guy that I've looked up to and wanted to emulate. Like, so he's been a big North Star for me. I would say coming up early, I was a big fan of a lot of ESPN people, a big fan of the Heat Index at the time, also because, around then, I right before I broke in, again, I've said before, I was a LeBron fan. So like I was rooting for him to succeed in Miami. And so I paid a lot of attention to the Heat Index with Brian Windhorst, Tom Haberstroh, and Kevin Arnovitz, who Kevin's been a mentor to me, and partly covered the Clippers under him, and he's been someone who through the years was like a big, he's no longer at ESPN or in the industry anymore, but for those, like I'll still remember someone, a higher up person at ESPN that I was talking to was like, word for word, Kevin's the best writer we have. And it was interesting because he was not the most famous writer at the company, but they were like he should be covering like politics, and he did have a little bit of a background in covering other stuff, but they were like, he's almost too smart to be covering the NBA. Like, that's how esteemed he was. So I would say Kevin Pelton is another one. J.A. Donde, I took his class at USC, and I grew up reading him in the LA Times. That's another big one. Arash Markazi, another mentor for me who I met at USC. Non-journalist, I would say the non-journalist who's had the biggest impact on my career has been Bill Simmons. I interned at Grantland my sophomore year at USC, and also just like growing up, loved the BS Report, loved reading him on Page 2, and he was definitely a big influence for me. Young Lido. Jovan, you don't even get a little happy when the Lakers are winning. Honestly, like I put it this way. As a reporter covering the team, it's always better for me to, like, when the team does well, it's better for me in my career. Like, you guys are happier. Like, typically the numbers are higher when the team does well in both viewership and readership. The team is in a better mood. And in general, like, covering a deeper playoff run is more fun. It's typically better for your career. Like, you've seen certain people have kind of broken out from covering championship teams. So but in terms of like rooting, I don't root. And I know that's kind of hard for some people to get, but like, in my opinion, it undermines my ability to be objective and to analyze the team. And again, I know there are some people who could do it well and still root, but I don't think I would be giving you guys my honest opinion or as close to it as possible if I had other rooting interests. I haven't seen the video of LeBron and Stephen A yet. Jerry Soriano, your lender for life, the best advertising in the game. Thank you for the super chat. Jackson adds 15 pounds. Vando studies Rodman. Gabe Fisher 2.0. I actually really like the Gabe Fisher comparisons because I feel like it's similar where their shooting numbers aren't great and they will go through stretches where the fan base is like infuriated. Like, I remember when I was a fan, Fish would piss me off so much with the shot selection and just like sometimes looking off Kobe or looking off Powell, and he would take his like mid-range pull-up jumper that would just, sail far right or whatever, and or far left, depending, whatever. And that would like infuriate me. But then he would hit the big shots, and he had like, Kobe loved him, Kobe trusted him, so like that carried weight. And I feel like with Gabe, it's a similar thing where he's actually shot better than Fisher in for the most part, like in general, or at least like the last couple of months. But like similar type of player where he'll take some shots where the fan base doesn't like it. He goes through these cold stretches, but then tonight he had some big shots, and he has had throughout his career a track record, especially during that 2023 finals run. Jackson does need to bulk up. I'd say 10 to 15 pounds. Though you want to be careful he doesn't lose the athleticism that he has. And Vando has studied Rodman, and like there are shades of Rodman in his game. It's just Rodman's kind of one of one, excuse me. Kevin Cambridge, when's the next collab with Trevor? Good question. I need to reach out to him. Jake from State Farm, do you close your journalist door a bit more at home watching the game? You guys really want me to be rooting for the team, and I get it. I know it's a hard thing to kind of like I've said before, on some level there will always be, look, I'll give you guys a good memory to kind of show my fandom. 2003, going for the four-peat, they lose to San Antonio. And that's like maybe the hardest I've cried in my life at like a non, like, real, like true tragedy, was like them losing to the Spurs in 2003. I was so devastated. So like that, like, I think that kid who was wearing the Shaq jersey and was also devastated when they traded Shaq, but was crying at them losing to the 2003 Spurs. I think that kid will always be somewhere there. So I'm not saying that kid will always be in me. I just, for my job, I feel like it's important to be as objective and analytical as I can be. Puppy Chow 302, who do you credit most for the Lakers' latest win streak? JJ, LeBron, Luka, or the other guys? I would credit everybody, to be honest. I would probably give the most credit, I guess, if we're saying this win streak, if we're not saying like the whole entire stretch in general, just to quickly, so 8 in a row, and leading score is not everything, but let's just go through it quickly. LeBron 40 at Portland, Luka 32 at Denver, LeBron 27 versus Dallas, LeBron 33 versus Minnesota, Luka 31 versus the Clippers, Luka 29 versus the Clippers, LeBron 34 versus New Orleans, Luka 32 versus New York. So LeBron and Luka have each led the team in scoring 4 times each over this stretch. I'll give a slight edge to LeBron. I think Luka, obviously, like I feel like the team is shifting more toward him, and he was the better player in the biggest win during this stretch, which was the Denver game. But LeBron, like even playing in the Portland game, as JJ mentioned, and during, like, Luka wasn't quite himself in the Dallas and Minnesota games, and even maybe like the first Clippers game. And LeBron was a big part, because like looking at it now, it's like LeBron 17 rebounds, 13 rebounds, 12 rebounds. Luka had a 15 rebound game in there. Luka's been the primary driver from an assist and ball handling perspective. He's got 3 games with 12 plus assists. So I think it's really close. And then look, I think JJ's coached his ass off and had great game plans. So I'd maybe go like LeBron 1A, Luka 1B, JJ 2, the other guys 3. But like I think they don't win all 8 without all 4 of these parties contributing. Mint Millions, is politics involved in your job at all? For sure. Like I can't give you guys my unfiltered opinion. That there's certainly an element of like, there are some takes, some opinions that I hold in that I just can't share publicly. But I mean, I think it's just like any job to some extent, like, and even in journalism, like whether you're covering the White House, whether you're covering entertainment, which I guess sports is but like whether you're covering the red carpet, whether you're covering sports, whether you're covering tech, like there's always some element of politics. So I can't say there's not, but I will say I've had just about everybody mad at me at some point for something I said, because I believe in like trying to tell the truth as much as I can, or at least my version of the truth. And sometimes that's going to ruffle some feathers. Angelco Azorad Rezo, thank you for the super chat. Yo, thanks always for the excellent content. Jovan Buha, great win. Second quarter stinker, second half comeback. Will shot selection improve this stretch? I think it will. I like, again, I think Austin, what we've learned, I think the Lakers can, I think that in a way, they almost have a higher margin for error defensively right now than offensively. Like defensively, we've seen they've been able to miss certain guys and like not really miss a beat and still be an elite defense. The offense has been far more up and down. And I think right now, missing Austin for a couple games, then him coming back and struggling tonight because he clearly was not himself physically, and then also missing Rui, I think like those 2 guys are clearly, we already knew this. They're third and fourth in scoring, third and fourth options, but like losing those 2 guys in particular, I think has really hurt the Lakers. And I think once those 2 guys get back, they get a little bit more of a sample size together, some more reps, some more experience. Maybe they practice at some point in the future. Maybe that would be a good idea. And to be clear, like they just haven't, like the schedule doesn't really allow it, but the next time they can practice, I think that it needs to be an offensive focus, or an offensively focused practice. That would be my suggestion. Lee Baggy, thank you for the super chat. Seen that halftime SAS and Braun clip going around? I have not, so I'm just gonna, let's look it up here, because apparently this is something that I missed. Okay. And Keith, I like that Keith is there. That's the best part. Because Keith is like, Keith, Keith will fight. Keith is a real one. Yeah. Jay says, Jovan, the basketball behind you looks like a bee's antenna or something. Maybe it's just getting late. It's actually it's a smiley face, and it's Chinatown Market. That is the brand. Mint Millions with the best comment of the evening. Can't believe the Mavs traded Luka. I don't understand it. I'll never understand it. Jay then follows up, can we get another basketball in the top second, two left cubby behind you? So you're saying like that one? So yeah, I got like a Father's Day gift from my son. I got a bobblehead of me, a little Funko Pop of me, Buha's block, start date, little plaque, basketball candle, books, Chinatown Market, basketball, Lakers championship ring from the 2020. They gave out replica championship rings, and that was first season on the Lakers beat. Stepped in thinking they were going to win a second championship, and that Solomon Hill happened. Sunnyside, undefeated, one. Jamison plays 12-0. He's been good. Yeah, I could give you guys another breakdown or more. Britton says, Jovan, I remember sending a super chat in like December asking who you thought would be the next face of the franchise post LeBron, and you said maybe Ant or Luka. It's funny how things work. I emoji. Yeah, so I will say that there had been some things in the ether about Luka one day potentially being a Laker, but it was not for Anthony Davis, and it was not for this season. It was more of maybe LeBron retires in 2026 and like Luka signs that summer and leaves Dallas, or either doesn't sign the Supermax and leaves, or signs the Supermax and eventually asks out. That had been some of the stuff kind of floating out there. Like I can kind of share that now, I guess, but did not anticipate this. Like there was nothing. They're getting him this season. They're getting him for AD. That was not out there at all. So like that was one thing that like, I think the shock of the timing and that they gave up AD for him to me was the most shocking part. But like if you told me the Lakers are trading for a superstar, I think he would have been on the short list for me of guys that I would have thought they would have been trading for. I just did not expect it to happen this soon. And like the context, like I thought it was going to be Luka and AD at some point in the future, not Luka and LeBron. Hen L, who's the next face of the franchise that will join LeBron after Luka retires? That one I don't have a good read on, because I think, like, for example, I mentioned Ant, like he had kind of been another guy that maybe is Ant a guy they trade for down the line, but I just don't. I'm not saying Ant and Luka couldn't work, but it does kind of feel like they probably would want a little bit of a different skill set for that second star. So I feel like it would probably have to be some type of like bigger wing or forward center, but I don't. I mean, I could throw names out there, but I would just be guessing. And El says Jokic. I mean, hey, Jokic, Wemby, Giannis, Zion, one of those guys. King Carter, Jovan, what were your thoughts on Lamar when he was playing? Did you feel he had all-star potential? I did. I think he's one of the certainly in the modern era, one of the better players, because he never made an All-Star game, right? I'm not misremembering him. Those like early, he never made an All-Star. Had he stayed with the Clippers, I think he might have. But JCU, do you think DK is traded in the offseason? Now we're getting into some football here. Yeah. I'll say yeah. L.A. Jovan, did you write for the Daily Trojan? I did for half a semester. So fun fact, I am like what are the only sickos in the world who is trying to have as short of a college experience as possible. So I actually graduated a semester early. I was only in college for 3.5 years because I wanted to cover the NBA. So I was trying to get out of there ASAP. So that was one of the things. Like, so I graduated in December and I got hired by Fox Sports in January. But so I went there because I covered the Daily Trojan my senior year final semester. Previously, I worked for Neon Tommy, which was a digital outlet at USC. And then I worked for, my first thing actually ever was Lake Show Life. If you guys know Lake Show Life, with Fansided, that was the first thing I did. Then I did Clipper Blog, which was part of the True Hoop Network at ESPN. Then I did ESPN LA, covering Lakers and Clippers, going to practices and games. Then I did Grantland. Then I continued doing ESPN through the rest of college. And then some Neon Tommy, Daily Trojan. Then I went to Fox Sports straight out of college. There 2 years, ESPN 2 years, Athletics 7 years. Britton, what's your NFL team? I don't have one, to be honest. I've really gotten into fantasy football, so like whoever I guess is my best player in fantasy. But Michael D, Jovan is versatile. I've actually not versatile. I have only covered basketball, and I've only covered. So my senior year was Andy Enfield, his first year. So I did like a story on him, kind of like a profile. But I've actually only covered outside of high school when I was forced to cover other stuff. I've only covered NBA and like very little college basketball, primarily just NBA. Like I've been very lucky in my career. I will say that with that. Oh, you guys meant, you guys, I thought, okay, take a step back. I thought you meant DK Metcalf, not Dalton Connect. Dalton, I would say that I think Dalton's been playing better, and there's a chance here for like a redemptive arc for him that if he plays really well the rest of the season and emerges as like the clear ninth man and maybe even eighth man in some scenarios, like maybe they don't trade him. But I do think they clearly traded him, and I think there was like a little bit of disappointment with his where his development was at that point, and I think that continued post trade. That has since I think he's turned a corner, but at the same time, I think based on their limited assets, if they're trading for like a Nick Claxton or something, right, or so like, because the thing has been, okay, now this summer they want to try and get a better center. Well, if they're trading for Nick Claxton, like Brooklyn's almost certainly going to demand Dalton Connect be in the trade. So like any significant player they're trading for, the team's going to ask for Dalton. And I don't necessarily think that's going to be a hurdle for the Lakers. So I think I think it's too early to tell, but I would say right now, I don't think I think it would just depend on like the player and the cost, and that being the driving force of whether he gets moved or not. Kevin Mendez, what up? Thank you for the super chat. What are your thoughts on the center minutes tonight? Let me look at it. So I didn't realize how much Jackson played. And I guess that's partly because of overtime. Jackson plays 34. Trey plays 13. So that's 47. And they ended up playing 53 minutes overall. So they played 6 minutes of small ball or centerless basketball. I keep correcting myself there. I thought it was fine. Like, I think on nights that Rui is available, he probably comes in and DFS plays. I mean, one interesting thing that I don't want to bring back this argument or conversation, but the Lakers are 10-0 with DFS in the starting lineup. I will just say that they've been good with Rui in the starting lineup too, and it's a good problem to have. But like, they are undefeated with DFS as a starter. I think if Rui plays, he probably plays like 35 to 38 minutes tonight, maybe even close to 40. And that affects Jackson. That affects Dorian. Probably shave off a couple minutes for LeBron. Maybe Jemison plays a little bit. Like, so cumulatively, like, that takes away from everyone. So I think it would have looked a little bit different if Rui was available. But for how Jackson played, with Trey, there was also, like, he got in foul trouble. And I think Mitchell Robinson, in particular, gave him some problems with, like, the offensive rebounding and whatever. So, like, they were -2 in Trey's 13 minutes. It wasn't like I don't think he played bad. I just think that Jackson played better. So it was nice to see that JJ is flexible enough to play Jackson more when it happens. King Carter, what are the best airports? Off the top of my head, top 3, I would say Portland is up there because it's small and inefficient. New Orleans is up there. LaGuardia is up there. They've really improved LaGuardia. I like SFO. SFO is a good one too. I'll just give you the 3 worst in my opinion. It's O'Hare, Atlanta, and JFK. I think those are the 3 worst. Though LAX, you could throw in the mix. But there's a lot of bad ones. Oh, I've had beef with Minnesota for a while, but that's a different. That's a story for another day. Rolla, thank you for super chat. Please ask Braun what he said to Stephen S. Smith, who needs mouthwash. All right, I'm going to wrap here. We went a little bit over the extra 15 minutes I said at the 1 hour mark, but I got a flight to catch tomorrow. I got some more writing to do, but I appreciate you all for rocking with me tonight. Huge, audience tonight. So I appreciate you, especially very late. It's almost 1 a.m. here Pacific time. But that will do it for tonight's show. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back on Saturday night after Lakers-Celtics, one of the biggest games of the season. Always an important matchup whenever the Lakers are playing the Celtics. It is a measuring stick game. It is a barometer game. And look, Lakers beat them by 21 points last time they played. So we shall see what happens. Big injury report tomorrow with Rui Hachimura. So that's something to watch out for. But thank you all so much for all the great questions tonight. And you guys learned a little bit about my bookshelf, a little bit about my college history. And I appreciate the late night gang. So shout out to you all. I will talk to you all very soon, less than a couple days. Shout out to Fang Charlie, Michael D, Hen L, J Note, Sunnyside J, RV 14, E Hernandez, Louis, Rolla, Chaco Thunder, Aesthetic Delta, Ryan, Jake, William. I think I got just about everybody. I said Fang Charlie, right? Dan. All right. Peace out, guys. Millions. All right. That'll do it. I will talk to you all very soon.